So the panel that we're going to have now is called Climate Action and Economic Opportunity for Indiana. So let's start with a spotlight on the extraordinary harm that climate change appears to be causing in 2015. This scene is from the state of Washington, which has faced wildfires like no other. This is a scene not from some place in sub-Saharan Africa, but from California, which has suffered the worst drought in modern Californian history. And yet, despite the fact that there's increasing evidence that climate change is raising its ugly head in 2015, there is also signs of great hope. At the local level, believe it or not, but Burlington, Vermont has become the first major city in the United States to be 100% powered by renewable energy. At the state level, also, despite the hostility that has been directed, unfortunately, towards renewable energy policies in many, many states, 18 out of 50 states in America in 2015, 18 out of 50, generate at least 15% of their power from renewable energy. And finally, at the national level, you may know of these two individuals who really have taken the lead on advancing the Clean Power Plan, which is the most ambitious effort by our country to cut greenhouse gas emissions, 32% by 2030. So once again, 32% by 2030 with respect to 2005 levels. And that's what we're going to be focusing on, the Clean Power Plan. Big picture, here's the timeline. The plan was introduced to the public in August. Next year, next September, there will be a deadline that all states face where they need to kind of lay out how they're going to achieve the implementation of this Clean Power Plan. Then 2 years afterwards, they have to submit their final plan to the US EPA. And then in 2022, the plan goes into effect. All states will need to be in compliance. And that by 2030, that goal will be achieved. Now, we are proud of the fact that our country has finally acted in a decisive way with respect to climate action. But to put it in perspective, our target is much less than the European Union. So while there's going to always be this jitter about, oh, this is crazy and so forth, but look, it's not nearly as aggressive as the European Union. Now, let's bring it back to Indiana. First point to know is that Governor Pence has charged his Attorney General with suing the US EPA to try to block the Clean Power Plan. And furthermore, both of our US senators are not really fans of the Clean Power Plan. We'll get to that in a little bit. Why is that? Why is it that something that is so morally compelling as tackling climate change would face resistance from really all of Indiana's leading political leaders? And the reason, purportedly, is economics. They make the argument that the Clean Power Plan will drive up electricity rates and therefore drive up electricity bills, and that in turn will push out businesses away from Indiana and lead to higher levels of unemployment. That's the heart of the critique. Now at HEC, as our friend Mark Fisher mentioned, is a data-driven organization. And so we'll acknowledge that yes, economic transitions caused by public policy can have effects, some negative, some positive. We believe quite strongly that on balance, the Clean Power Plan will put Indiana in a much better place. So while critics always focus on economic risks, we want to put the spotlight on economic opportunity. And so the goal of this panel is to help you make the case when you meet with state legislators, when you contact Senator Donnelly's office, to say, look, the Clean Power Plan is going to be an economic boon to Indiana. And we want to give you some real compelling facts to make that case. So I do want to acknowledge the fact that there are definitely co-benefits of the Clean Power Plan in terms of improved air quality and therefore improved respiratory health. We definitely want to acknowledge that. But this panel will be focused on the economic argument, which is the one you know you're going to hear when you talk to your legislators and your U.S. senators. In particular, we're going to focus on two technologies that we think have immense economic promise in Indiana: energy efficiency and solar energy. And that, again, brings us to Julia Friedman, our energy efficiency expert, to give her presentation.
Thanks very much, Jesse, and thanks so much for having me. As Jesse mentioned, I work for the Midwest Energy Efficiency Alliance. So just to introduce folks to us, we are a regional organization based out of Chicago. We work in 13 states in the Midwest, and our members include utilities, investor-owned utilities, municipal utilities, as well as co-ops, energy efficiency technology and service providers, state energy offices, local government entities, as well as other research and advocacy organizations. And we play a number of roles. I would say that the two camps we kind of break down into the most are advancing energy efficiency policies in the states that we work in, and driving program innovation and delivering programs on behalf of utilities and state energy offices. So I wanted to start, I'm going to talk a lot about the benefits that energy efficiency has brought to Indiana. I wanted to start with just a couple examples showing the range of beneficiaries and some of the motivations. And on each of the following slides, I do include the amount of the incentive that the projects received from the utilities. And that's sort of just as a reminder that the utilities do have to be a partner in this in some way, shape, or form, and on these projects they have been. So we're starting with a business in Northeast Indiana. They are a automotive fuel system and engine components manufacturer. They did a lighting upgrade that will pay for itself within 9 months, and then all of the savings beyond that are to increase their competitiveness and improve their bottom line. And so to look at the motivations, the plant manager's quote says, "It is important to us to reduce our carbon footprint, and the Energizing Indiana program," those were the programs under the state's energy efficiency resource standard, the mandate that the state had, and the Energizing Indiana program has made it easier for us to accomplish that goal. So energy efficiency is also good for cities. The city of South Bend also undertook a lighting upgrade and in 3 of their garages downtown, and they have a 2.5-year payback on that. And all of those future savings, again, can be redirected towards other city services to better serve their citizens. It's good for students. In Beech Grove, Indiana, the Central Elementary School was struggling with regulating its air temperature and airflow, so they took on upgrades to the building in terms of the boilers, the hot water pumps, sensors and controls, and you can see just how large, almost $165,000 a year in annual operational and utility bill savings. Again, these are all savings that can then go be used to serve those students in other ways. And this was about improving the quality of the environment of learning for those students. And lastly, it's good for the state. So across the Midwest, energy efficiency is the least cost resource when we look at our energy resources. It is 3 times cheaper than new natural gas and coal plants, and 2 times cheaper than wind energy. So I included a quote from Governor Pence. This did come after the energy efficiency mandate that the state had was repealed. And so I think this is important to look at what our policymakers are saying and then remind them of that to better align their actions with their words. So after the bill was passed, which was obviously unfortunate, he said the low-cost energy is an essential element of Indiana's economic development and prosperity. By reducing our need for electricity, we reduce our need to build expensive power plants at a cost to Hoosier ratepayers. For this reason, I believe that energy efficiency is an important part of our all of the above strategy. So certainly working together, we'd like to figure out what that looks like going forward. So I did mention these Energizing Indiana programs, and so there were 3 years of Energizing Indiana programs between 2012 and 2014, and they had such a strong return on investment. So in those 3 years, for every dollar that was invested in residential energy efficiency programs, $3 in benefits was returned. On the commercial and industrial side, you saw even stronger return on investment, with $5 in benefits being achieved for every $1 spent on energy efficiency. And I would note, when I talk about benefits here, it's a very limited set of benefits that we're looking at. The only things that are measured are the avoided cost of purchasing electricity, the upgrades to transmission and distribution systems, and the cost of increasing the capacity of the system. So health, environmental, other societal benefits, those aren't even included in those numbers. So these are really lowballing the benefits of energy efficiency to the state. And I would note, so the biggest benefit probably in terms of societal benefits for energy efficiency are the jobs. And in the last evaluation report for the Energizing Indiana programs, there was an estimate that 18,679 jobs were created over those 3 years that the programs were being implemented. And those jobs are coming from that actually doesn't count the direct administration of the program by a company called Good Sense, but it does include some of the other aspects of implementing programs. It includes the need for new energy efficient equipment and technology to be developed and delivered in the delivery of those programs. And then it's also reflective of the jobs created by energy bill savings. So as businesses and residents are saving on their energy bills, those saved dollars can be spent elsewhere in the economy. And so that's creating jobs. And then I just wanted to note that in 2014, as this legislative debate was unfolding, 11 companies, big companies like Johnson Controls and Siemens, United Technologies, came together and wrote a letter to Governor Pence. And this definitely gave him pause. It didn't achieve its intended goal of stopping the bill from going through, but they came together to talk about the jobs that this energy efficiency policy that the state had supported. So they together represent over 10,000 manufacturing and efficiency jobs. And so I really appreciated the panel earlier with the Chambers of Commerce and really reaching out to the business community in our discussions and efforts to advance energy efficiency. So I've mentioned the energy efficiency mandate that the state has, and I just wanted to dig a little bit deeper into what the impact of repealing that policy has been. So as you can see, between 2011, 2014, energy efficiency was really ramped up. And then at the end of 2014, the policy was ended and the programs ended, and we got one-year plans from the utilities for 2015. And you can see the significant drop. It's back to 2011 levels. It is now we can't cover the industrial and commercial load as much as we could with program offerings, because they're allowed to opt out of participating in these programs. And going forward's really to be determined. The utilities programs are currently being submitted and reviewed at the Utility Commission, and we'll certainly be analyzing what that looks like going forward. So then taking a step back, I think the last slide demonstrated, and the previous slides, what the benefit of having an energy efficiency resource standard brought to the state of Indiana. But looking at the region that we cover, we can see that it's energy efficiency resource standards. These policies are what's driving savings and ultimately the policies that are able to deliver all of the benefits of energy efficiency to citizens in those states. And so the orange is those are states that have energy efficiency resource standards, and so this is as of 2013, so Indiana was included. And then the states that leave energy efficiency towards some other policy, essentially up to the utilities to determine how it'll be included in their resource procurement. So I think it's interesting to note here that even in Michigan, which is a state, they're number 2 on this list in terms of savings achieved, and they are currently in the process of dismantling their energy efficiency resource standard, even though there's a ton of voter support in that state. The Christian Coalition of Michigan did a survey of voters across the state, and they found that 90% of the voters across all demographics want to expand energy efficiency. 77% of the voters approve of the current policy framework for energy efficiency, and 64% of voters view energy efficiency as a policy that increases jobs and reduces cost of energy to ratepayers. So despite overwhelming voter support, policymakers are still moving forward with removing this policy. So all of that on energy efficiency resource standards, it's important to realize that it's not the only way to drive efficiency in a state. The private sector certainly plays a role. There are companies like Johnson Controls, Siemens, and smaller companies as well that will cover the upfront costs of an energy efficiency upgrade and then be paid back through the savings. Education's hugely important, whether it's workforce training or providing technical assistance through local competitions among businesses or education within schools. Appliance efficiency standards are important. That's going above and beyond the federal standards set for appliances. And then building energy codes to ensure that new construction or projects that have deep renovations will meet higher levels of building energy codes. And then it is not a presentation without a slide on the Clean Power Plan. So the Clean Power Plan, as Jesse mentioned, was finalized in August. And compared to the draft rule that had been out, the Midwest was hit hard with the targets that were set. And they're much more stringent than they were in the draft rule. And Indiana has one of the toughest targets to meet in terms of the percent of reductions in emissions that it has to achieve. It's 39% emission rate reduction by 2030. That's a lot, but that's also a great opportunity for clean energy and energy efficiency. And one of the things that I would note that we're running into a lot is that the final rule looks very different from the draft rule in terms of the treatment of energy efficiency. And the way it appears on the face of it in the final rule is that efficiency was left out, but that's not true. So on every fact sheet that the EPA has put out, they say they expect states to use energy efficiency to comply with the final rule, as it is a low-cost resource with huge potential in every state. So if you're talking to your legislators, if you're talking to your friends and colleagues and they say that efficiency has been left out, that's not true. It's just up to the state to do it. So lots of opportunity. I think this past year has been kind of hard in terms of state legislation, but certainly great opportunity going forward. So thank you very much.
Julia is absolutely right that the goal that Indiana faces is higher than it was in the initial plan, but I will say that actually Indiana's goal is the 3rd lowest in the Midwest. Among the 12 states, it is the lowest goal, but absolutely accurate to say that it is much higher than the original goal that was proposed in the draft rule. And with that, I will introduce Amy Hart.
Thanks, Jesse, and thanks to all of you. I think before I wanted to start the presentation, as Jesse mentioned, I am not a Hoosier. I'm from Wisconsin. I'm from Milwaukee, but I had the pleasure of meeting and working with a lot of you last year when we got involved in solar legislation. And so whether it was the Hoosier Environmental Council, the Sierra Club, the Indiana DG Association, which is Distributed Generation Association, the Hoosier Interfaith Power and Light, and especially Denise at NAACP. You heard Jesse speak volumes. It was having everybody together, working together, along with CAC and countless other groups, made that bill just terrible. No legislators really wanted to touch it or be an advocate for it. And I'm going to touch a little bit on some policy strategy, but I just wanted to thank you for having me and continuing to have solar be part of this conversation. So I want to start and give you a little rundown of who Sunrun is and how it's a good example of a solar company that what we can see in Indiana. So Sunrun is a national residential solar financing and installation company. We're in 15 states across the country, and we do financing, installation, and monitoring of systems. So in certain states where there's a big market, like California, we have crews on the ground in Sunrun trucks. When we enter into a market, so for example, South Carolina became a recent state that we entered and started selling solar, we partner with installers on the ground. So we know that there's a lot of trained and qualified installers, and so we like to partner with them and help offer the financing, so we bring the financing to the homeowners. So that's a little bit about us. We also are a member of a group, a business group called the Alliance for Solar Choice, or TASC for short. And we work around the country in all 50 states and in DC on rooftop solar issues. And so I'll talk a little bit about the difference in solar, but rooftop solar or distributed generation is where you use it, right? Where you use the power. It could be homes, churches, schools, businesses, you name it. And so there's a lot of policies that are key to making sure that we all have the ability to put solar on our homes and on our businesses. Before we talk about the potential, let's talk about where we're at. This is a good slide for Indiana. This is looking at Midwest solar installations, or the capacity, I should say, not the number of installations, but the capacity. As all of you know, you have some great large solar installations in Indiana. And airport's a perfect example. It always makes me a little happier to fly into Indiana to see solar. And you can see Wisconsin, where I come from, we have a ways to go. But there's a lot of potential. And so I would just want to thank you guys for being leaders in the Midwest when it comes to the amount of installation. When it comes to the other economic bonuses, we've got 1,400 solar jobs in Indiana. And that ranges from installation, manufacturing, and sales and distribution, so up and down the supply chain. This is a photo of Fronius inverters. There's some good guys. They're up in Portage, Indiana. They opened up this manufacturing facility a few years ago, and this past spring they announced that they were hiring, I believe it was up to 30 to 50 more people. So they were continuing to add to their workforce. And those are the types of stories that elected officials need to hear and local officials need to hear, because that is what drives our economy, and that is what's currently happening and already happening in Indiana. Some of the other work that's happening in the Midwest, this is close to my heart. It originated in Wisconsin. The Midwest Renewable Energy Association does training for installers and salespeople. So people who are on the roof to make sure that they are doing it safely and that they're quality installations. They have worked with the Department of Energy on the Department of Energy's Sunshot program to expand training throughout the Midwest. So there are training opportunities in Indiana and throughout the state. Purdue has been a great partner in the Midwest Solar Training Partnership. So certainly look that up if you're interested in having those training opportunities in your backyard, because that means we've got a local solar workforce that's trained and ready to go. So you kind of saw the solar job rankings were in the 20s. We're kind of in the middle of the pack with Wisconsin and Indiana and most of the other Midwest states. What's the potential? Over 50,000 jobs in California. They're number one for the number of jobs. You would see, if you're in California, and I work for a solar company, and it always throws me for a loop when I go to visit. There's solar in Home Depots. You can buy it when you go to buy your appliances. You can buy solar. You see huge billboards. You see trucks. We are the official solar company of the LA Dodgers. Being a Brewers fan, I'm hoping we eventually get here. But it's like, what baseball teams have official solar companies? Like, this is part of what our future industry can look like and what we need to have in the Midwest. So I kind of wanted to give you that inspiration of what it could look like. And we're just at the beginning. So to put that in perspective, California has 5% of their electricity mix. 5% is from solar and distributed resources, so renewables. We are at less than 1%, right? So they have 50,000 jobs with only 5% of their energy mix. This doesn't have to be replacing everything, but it's just this exponential growth, and we'll see a little bit about what that potential is on rooftop solar. So as we mentioned, the Clean Power Plan includes renewables as one of the building blocks to reach our goals. But we need to make sure that that includes all types of renewable energy and all types of solar. And so I like to call it the all of the above strategy for solar. We hear the all of the above thrown around quite a bit when it comes to an energy plan, but this is an opportunity. We need to make sure there's 3 different types of solar. There's utility scale solar. A good example is the Indiana airport, the photo here, which is owned and operated and run by the utility. So it's a power plant, just like a coal plant. And it's rate-based, which means we're all paying for it as ratepayers. There's community solar, which can be owned by utilities. It can be owned by community groups, by co-ops, by organizations. And so there's some opportunity there where people who wouldn't normally be able to purchase solar, if you live in an apartment or you have beautiful trees you just don't want to cut down on your property, you could participate in community solar. And then rooftop solar. And that is, excuse me, on any type of rooftop, churches, schools, again, homes, businesses. And so we need to make sure that that's a mix and there's a difference. And states have broad discretion on how they include solar or how they include renewables in that plan. And we want to make sure that we continue to see growth in all 3 areas. So you can see this is a national forecast, but the background, and it shows the blue is the amount of residential solar, yellow is commercial, and then green is utility scale solar. So we've continued to see an increase in all 3 sectors. Actually, commercial has probably slowed down the most. What we don't want to see is that green bar take over everything, right? It needs to be a mix to make sure that we have reliable power, but we have affordable power, and we still have control over our own energy bills, and we can lower our bills. Because what happens is, there's benefits of both, but when you have a utility scale solar farm, it's still far away from where you need it. We have tons of roofs, and if we're not using that roof space, we're not using power efficiently, and we're not making sure that there's the economic benefits, but also using the technology wisely. And hopefully I won't go too long, but we'll talk a little bit about why that bar drops off dramatically if we don't get the extension on the solar investment tax credit at the end of 2016. So this is the rooftop potential. So remember when I said we have less than 1% of solar capacity in the state, in almost all of the Midwest states? This is the potential percentage of electricity that can be generated just on rooftops in each one of the Midwest states. And we're at less than 1% for all solar. So there's a lot of rooftops. We've got a lot of potential, and it would be silly to not use that and just have large utility scale solar farms or power plants or natural gas plants that we're getting charged for. So that's the potential. So why is it important? Most importantly, it allows us to control our energy bills, maintain them. We're not part of a volatile energy market, which may go up and down, regardless of if it's coal or natural gas. And we get to lower those energy bills in the future. And that becomes very important for customers. And as the price goes down, it's easier to add solar on top of energy efficiency. So lots of times, I worked for the city of Milwaukee, running their solar program for about 5 years. And we'd go out and do Solar 101 sessions, and everybody wants to do solar. And they're like, all right, I want to do this. Okay, have you done energy efficiency? Right? It's so much cheaper to do solar after you have an energy efficient refrigerator, after you've replaced your lights, and applause from the energy efficiency. So a lot of it ended up being energy efficiency. So we had, energy efficiency programs and renewable programs go hand in hand because you want to make sure that you're doing both of those to maximize, again, the technology and your investment. But we've seen the price of solar come down dramatically. When I first started in the industry, the price per watt of solar was probably $12 to $15 installed. Now it's less than $3. So that's a huge difference, and that's because of manufacturing improvements, it's because of the installation timeline, but it's becoming more viable, which means more and more people can take control of their energy bills. Okay, the other piece, the other economic benefit, more jobs, to put it fairly bluntly. I would encourage you to go to solarstates.org. That's where the data from all of those states came from. It's really just interesting to see where everybody's at. but we have nearly 200,000 solar employees across the country. We said we had 1,400 here in Indiana. It's growing exponentially. It's the only industry that is continually seeing growth every single quarter, even through the recession. And there's more employees in solar than oil and gas combined. And we're not slowing down. And I think what's interesting is that these are jobs, it's not one plant where you build it and you're done. It's not one pipeline where you build it and you're done. But these are jobs where you have a manufacturing facility that's expanding because they need more solar for more rooftops. These are installers that are going in and creating relationships in neighborhoods where they're putting solar on one home, and the neighbor comes out and says, oh my gosh, I've been meaning to do solar. Can you come give me a solar assessment? I want to put solar on my home. Literally, that's how solar is expanding right now in the Midwest, it's definitely word of mouth. So we're just going to see that increase. These are jobs that can't be outsourced, right? You need that installer on the roof doing the work. And so it's really exciting for local officials especially. This is the solar career map. If you're a student, if you work with students, if you work with local elected officials, and they're like, really, what kind of jobs are there in solar? Yeah, we see the guy on the roof, but what else is there to do? There is the Interstate Renewable Energy Council, IREC. The website's on the bottom. They created this solar career map, which is one of the, I love playing with this, that you can go through different types of job opportunities and different types of careers, and they tell you what the training is, what the opportunity is, and what the opportunity is for advancement. Right, so you can kind of set different pathways, and it's just a really interesting map. And I think one of the important pieces is that this is a diversity of employment opportunities. So there's sales, there's manufacturing, there's legal, there's marketing. I can't tell you how many installers need help with websites and marketing, if I can just put that out there. They know what ohms are, they know how to install solar, but if anybody wants to help and reach out and become an intern with an installer, it would help immensely. So there's all these different opportunities, and so we need to make sure that elected officials know there's a diversity of employment, but there's also diversity in employment. So we've worked a lot with trying to make sure that when we partner with installers or we come into a state, that the training programs are in the right places and everywhere. So we make sure that there's solar available for everyone, but there's solar jobs available for everyone in a state, geography as well as culturally. Okay. All right, strong policies. Net metering. We have it in 44 states. This is a policy that allows rooftop solar to work. And it's an essential policy, it's a fundamental policy for rooftop solar. It's in 44 states, and as we've heard a little bit this morning, this has wide appeal, bipartisan support. Basically what it is it allows you to generate power on your home. If you happen to not be home, and you're not using, you have some excess power, it's sunny out during the day, your meter spins backwards, and your neighbor gets to use those electrons while you're not at work. And you get a credit for that solar power that you generated. You store that credit on the grid, and then at night you use that credit up. So that's it in a nutshell. If you want more details on how it works, there's a half a dozen brilliant DePaul University students who can tell you all about net metering through their program. But it's an essential policy. We've seen it in place, but we've also seen it under attack by utilities across the country. And this is part of a playbook by utilities. And we were, I don't think I want to say we were surprised, but when utilities attempted to eliminate and roll back net metering and add fees on rooftop solar customers in a state that has less than 1,000 net metered solar customers, we were kind of taken aback. But that's the strategy of trying to squash an industry and squash this opportunity before it gets off the ground while we're still getting our feet under us. And so it's really important to be able to have fair production and making sure we have solar produced right where we use it, and so your neighbors can use any excess. One of the things I think that's an interesting strategy for us to keep in mind is as we're talking about the Clean Power Plan implementation, utilities are going to say, well, fine, we'll build a solar power plant. Right? We love solar, we'll build solar, we'll control it, don't worry, we'll control it, we'll own it, we'll charge you for it. But we love solar, don't worry about it. But one of the benefits of having all of the net metered systems, so all of our rooftop solar systems that are net metered to the grid should count towards our goal because it's helping us reduce the carbon emissions. So using that as leverage to maintain net metering is a strong policy. Some states will probably incentivize it. There are some states that we are in the Midwest where we want to just maintain it and keep that ability. So using that as a leverage to make sure we say, well, if someone's making a private investment in solar and they're reducing carbon emissions for all of us, that's a benefit, and we should be able to support that as part of the Clean Power Plan. And it doesn't cost us, it doesn't cost the other ratepayers any money, as opposed to being rate-based. Like I said, it's under attack, but it has strong bipartisan support, and that's what's really interesting about it. I want to give you some success stories. South Carolina, this past year, we entered the market there after Governor Nikki Haley, who's a Republican, and the supermajority of their legislature, all Republicans, unanimously adopted net metering, unanimously adopted third-party ownership, and opened up a market for distributed generation and rooftop solar. And she has become a huge advocate. There are mayors that have become huge advocates for solar in South Carolina, as well as North Carolina, trying to protect it. Governor Chris Christie in New Jersey, happens to be running for president, recently signed a bill in New Jersey to expand their net metering program and allow more people to net meter, allow larger systems. And so we're seeing this bipartisan support and this leadership across the country. And quite honestly, that was part of what helped defeat the bill this last year when the utilities tried to eliminate that option here in Indiana. So it's something that I think we can certainly build on. One of the other pieces that local communities as well as the state can look at are financing solutions. So if this is part of our future, what can states do, what can cities do to make sure that it's viable for more people? And that includes third-party ownership or leasing opportunities. I could go on at length about that, but we'll save that for a different conversation. But those are some barriers in several states, including Indiana, where this is a chart that shows third-party ownership or what leasing would do. Instead of having one utility bill, you buy less from Duke Energy, whoever your power provider is, and then you have one flat bill to the solar company who would lease that system to you over a period of time. So instead of you going to a bank and getting a loan, you don't have an upfront cost, but you pay as you go. That's part of what our model is. Quite honestly, that's 70% of the solar market across the country. That's something we don't have clarified here in Indiana. That's allowed. And that's the same as in Wisconsin and Minnesota and a few other states. That's really keeping the market from taking off. PACE financing is property assessed clean energy, which allows financing on property tax bills. It mainly has been used for commercial, but is now supposedly available for residential projects, and that can be used for energy efficiency or renewable energy projects. And on-bill financing, if you have a friendly utility that's willing to finance systems on their bill, good. Let me know when you find one. There are good. I shouldn't say that. I'm being hard. But it's lots of times we're getting to the point now where if you open up a market, you do some education with banks and loan officers that the financing, the interest rate is coming down. About 10 years ago, it was a much bigger barrier where it was hard for folks to find financing to do those projects. Commercial projects are a different kettle of fish where they really need to pull together as much creative financing as possible. A few last slide, just a few other policies to keep in mind. The solar investment tax credit, which I alluded to with that cliff of how the production was going. This is a 30% federal tax credit, which has been driving the solar market for the last 10 years, helping develop at least somewhat of a level playing field. The fossil fuel industry gets 8 times what the renewable energy industry does in fossil fuel subsidies or incentives. And so it's something that at least helped the industry start to get going. If that goes off a cliff and is eliminated, the local installers, especially here in the Midwest, they'll be devastated. And that will go a much longer way to killing the market than trying to eliminate net metering or adding fees. So this is up to vote. They're going to be acting on this year. by the end of the year. So if you have those cards in front, I know there's a lot of things to include in that card, so maybe slip an extra piece of paper in there and say, and another thing. Don't forget about the solar ITC, because it is really crucial for the market to keep going. And again, from the solar industry, we talk about, fine, we would love unilateral disarmament. Let's have all the subsidies go away. But until they're willing to have that conversation, you can't just let this industry go off a cliff. We need that continued support. And then local action, get the local officials on your side, and local residents. So you can do, if there's things either happening or not happening at the State House, you can help the solar market and help advance get more people to install solar by making permitting easier. When I worked for Milwaukee, we put our permitting. We had a flat fee. We went from having it based on the cost of your project, so then you never knew what your permitting fee was going to be, to a flat fee of $70, regardless of the project size. And it went from 3 to 4 weeks of going through a building review to same-day approval. So those are the types of things that can really help installers and are really easy wins to promote at a local level. We also have, there's also group buy programs that happen across the country, which can help just educate people about rooftop solar, about how much it might cost, helping to lower the cost, providing financing. So I would encourage you to just Google solar group buys, and you'll come up with lots of different examples. But first and foremost, and we were talking about this with lessons learned through net metering, is taking the time to educate people, not just through PowerPoints or slides, but take people on a tour of a solar system. If you have a home, if you have a church that has solar, host one of those greening, what are they called, greening your community events, and invite the mayor, invite your city council members, your elected officials, because seeing it in person changes minds immediately. So that would be really helpful. This is a state senator out in Delaware. So make sure when you put solar on your roof, or if it's somewhere in your community at a school, that it doesn't just sit on your roof, that you use it to build advocates, because that's going to be the huge change that we see at the local and state level. So thank you.
Thank you so much, Amy. What a tremendous amount of information you've given us. And no, I mean that. And unfortunately, we are again running out of time, and I think this is what happens when you have people who are so incredibly knowledgeable as Julia and Amy are. And we only have 5 minutes left for this session. I want to ask one question to Julia, just in the spirit of balance here. Thank you very much. And I promise you, we will do what I said earlier, is we will try to facilitate, thank you, a webinar where the questions that you've asked can be answered. I'm sure that both of our friends here will give us that opportunity. Julia, we've seen a sea change, as we know, over the last several years in terms of kind of contempt for certain types of clean energy public policies. What right-leaning state, what conservative-leaning state, in your purview, has stuck in there and said, you know what, this clean energy stuff, this clean energy public policy is really good for us? Because that certainly plays into the broader conversation about the economic case for the Clean Power Plan.
Yeah, so the options are becoming more limited, I would say. We have seen, I would say, Wisconsin is holding on. Their structure is a little bit different. Rather than telling the utilities they have to procure a certain amount of energy efficiency annually, it's more of a spending goal. And it's come under attack, but so far their program, which is in some ways was similar to what Indiana had, they have a statewide administrator of the program. They still have that in place. Michigan had been a really great example of a right-leaning state, and we were caught very off guard this past fall when things changed pretty drastically. And then I would say, Iowa is probably more moderate. But what I would note about Iowa is that they are a state where the Utility Commission has come out, one of the biggest sort of groups that are against energy efficiency resource standards are the industrial community, the industrial consumers. And that's often where these conversations start. They start as industrial customers saying, we want out of these programs, we don't want to pay into them. And then the case in Indiana was that it quickly became, let's get rid of all the programs. And the Utility Commission in Iowa just straight up said that all consumers have to pay into these programs. It's an issue of equity, and we're not going to entertain an opt-out. So I think that's a very important stance for utility commissioners to take, as well as others.
Okay, great. Thank you very much, Julia. All right, well, we only have a few minutes left, and we're going to pivot to the call to action. Just as Tim had done for his panel, I'll do the same for mine. I want to talk about two quick pieces of public policy that are going to come up very likely in the 2016 General Assembly, and then talk about this urgent threat we have to try to defeat what's called the Congressional Review Act. All right, so in the 2016 session, which starts in January, it's going to be a short session. There's two things we're anticipating. One is that the electric utilities will try to resurrect some form of their anti-solar bill, which some of you may recall was HB 1320 from last session. So we don't know what form it will take. We just have a sense from talking to different lawmakers, from talking to some utility officials, that some type of anti-solar bill will be in place. Fortunately, we built a coalition, as Amy mentioned, that will reconvene and fight another day. A second thing to flag is, as we know, there is a segment of the General Assembly that has pretty strong views that are not favorable towards the EPA. And so what that might translate into is a resolution that will be introduced during the 2016 General Assembly that condemns the Clean Power Plan. And we want to make sure that climate advocates are there in force, talking about the health benefits of climate action, the economic benefits of climate action, and of course the moral benefits of climate action. And on that last point, what's been so encouraging, as so many of you know, is the unveiling of the Pope's encyclical and how that has really galvanized a lot of Catholics in Indiana and people of faith in general. So those are two things to flag in the 2016 General Assembly. The third thing is the CRA. As I mentioned, several groups in this room are extremely concerned about this. So the Congressional Review Act is a very underutilized statute, thank goodness, passed in, I believe, 1996, that effectively says that Congress will review a regulation. So far, so good. I mean, that's their prerogative to oversee the executive agencies, but then they have the ability to void a regulation. And so what has happened is that there is a very high likelihood that as early as Monday and possibly by Wednesday, there will be an effort to put on the U.S. Senate floor a Congressional Review Act policy that condemns the Clean Power Plan. This is a great threat. And what we are deeply concerned about is that U.S. Senator Joe Donnelly, who has spoken favorably about renewable energy and energy efficiency, has spoken quite negatively in meetings that several of us have had with his senior staff, and also to a little degree with himself. We have a sense that first of all, he said some pretty negative things about the Clean Power Plan, Senator Donnelly, but we're very concerned that he actually might vote in favor of the Congressional Review Act. So our call to action to everybody is to email Senator Donnelly or call Senator Donnelly urging him to oppose the Congressional Review Act. Now, we're all here, probably around 450 people, and we're going to do an experiment. And that is, we're going to make a collective call to U.S. Senator Joe Donnelly. Are you ready? Woo! My iPhone with 15% battery life will be our gateway to U.S. Senator Joe Donnelly. All right. Now what we're going to do, this has never been done at any of our Greening the Statehouse events. We're going to do a group voicemail. All right? So what that means is if everyone could just get up, you probably wanted to anyway, and just come to the front here, and we're going to make a call. I'm hopefully not going to bomb, all right? Well, I think I'm good. Thank you.
Thank you for reaching Senator Joe Donnelly's office. Our office hours are Monday through Friday from 9 a.m. to 6 p.m. Please leave a message and someone will call you back shortly. Thank you very much and have a great day.
Hi, Senator Donnelly. This is Jesse Kharbanda. I'm the Executive Director of the Hoosier Environmental Council. HEC is Indiana's largest environmental policy organization. I'm here to talk to you about the Clean Power Plan, and in particular to urge you to support the Clean Power Plan and oppose the Congressional Review Act. But it's not just me that wants to convey that message to you. It's actually me and 450 good friends who are with me. So Senator Donnelly, support the Clean Power Plan. Oppose the Congressional Review Act. Thank you, Senator. For listening to the voices from all across Indiana. We are not going to give up in advancing this cause. Thank you very much, Senator.